Okay, picture this. You're a CEO. You are, sitting in your corner office, the coffee's gone cold, the city skyline is kind of gray outside, and you are staring at the annual budget.
Mm-hmm.
You scan down the lines, marketing, R&D, operations, and then your eye lands on a line item that is just absolutely massive.
Yeah.
It's the line for leadership development.
And if you look at the global picture, I mean, that number is just jaw-dropping. Collectively, organizations around the globe are spending roughly $50 billion a year on this stuff.
50 billion.
Yeah.
B as in billion. That is the GDP of a small country. That's more than the GDP of Jordan or Tunisia. So you'd think, great, with that kind of investment, we must be absolutely drowning in amazing leaders.
Right.
Our companies must be running like Swiss watches. You assume that money is buying you, I don't know, the next generation of Steve Jobs or Indra Nooyi. But here's where it gets really interesting and, frankly, a little depressing.
It is. It's the multi-billion-dollar paradox. Because despite that $50 billion price tag, when you actually survey these same organizations, 33% of them, a third, say they lack the leadership to actually execute their strategies.
Wait, hold on. Let's just pause there because that is a staggering statistic. So they're spending the money, they're writing these massive checks to consultants and universities, but they admit openly that they still can't do the job.
They can't do the job.
They have the strategy, but they don't have the generals to fight the war.
Exactly. And it gets worse. Another third of organizations say they can't see past the next 3 to 5 years because they don't have the leadership bench, the next generation, to get them there.
So combine those numbers.
Yeah, you combine those, and 2/3 of companies are essentially saying we don't have the leaders we need, while simultaneously pouring money into a bucket that has this massive hole in the bottom.
That is wild. I mean, if you bought a car that only started 10% of the time or a phone that dropped 90% of your calls, you would return it immediately.
Oh, instantly.
You'd sue the manufacturer, you'd write a scathing review.
Yep.
But companies keep buying these leadership programs where the failure rate is somewhere between 50 and 90%. Why?
Yeah.
Why is there such a massive leadership gap?
It's this massive disconnect, and honestly, it's a source of huge frustration for CEOs. I've spoken to so many who see training as this black hole of investment.
The black hole.
You throw money in, you send people to a nice hotel for a weekend to, build Lego towers or do trust falls, and then nothing comes out the other side. Nothing changes in the P&L. The culture doesn't shift. And the reason for this failure is exactly what we're diving into today.
Okay.
We are breaking down the book Leadership at Scale by Claudio Feser, Michael Rennie, and Nikolai Chen-Nielsen. And these guys are from McKinsey & Company.
And McKinsey, I mean, they know a thing or two about this. They're not just guessing or writing based on anecdotes from a couple of cocktail parties, right?
No, absolutely not. This isn't a memoir from a retired general or some CEO writing about their gut instincts or their one weird trick. They're drawing on a database of over 375,000 data points from 165 organizations.
Yeah.
So this is data-driven analysis. It's empirical. And their premise is, look, we've been doing it all wrong. We treat leadership like it's magic, like it's about finding these heroic figures or born leaders.
The great man theory. That whole idea that you need a figure on a white horse to come save the company.
Yeah,
the charismatic savior who walks in and just fixes everything by sheer force of personality.
Exactly. That is the Hollywood version of leadership. But the authors argue that leadership isn't magic, it's a science. And more specifically, it's an engineering problem. The goal isn't to find a few heroes, it's to build better leadership across the entire organization at scale.
So it's about reliability, not heroism.
That's it.
That is a huge shift in perspective. So we're moving from finding the chosen one to something more like upgrading the operating system of the whole company. It's less about talent scouting and more about, structural engineering.
Precisely. And they have a framework to do it. They call it the Leadership at Scale Diamond. And they claim that if you follow this framework, and look, it is rigorous, it is not a quick fix, you can flip that success rate from a dismal 10% to nearly 100%.
Those are bold claims.
Yeah.
10 to 100 is a massive jump. So, all right, let's get into it. But before we can fix leadership, I feel like we need to define what we're actually talking about, because leadership is one of those words. Everyone uses it, but nobody seems to agree on what it actually means. Is it a title? Is it charisma? Is it just being the boss?
The authors are very, very specific here, and this definition frames everything else we'll talk about. They say we have to move away from leadership as a title. Just because you have chief or VP in your job description doesn't mean you're leading. They define leadership as A set of behaviors that in a given context align an organization, foster execution, and ensure organizational renewal.
Okay, that's a dense sentence. I want to unpack that
Well,
because every single word there seems chosen very carefully. Three big concepts: alignment, execution, and renewal. This is what they call the triad, right?
that's the triad.
Let's break those down because I feel like companies usually pick one and just totally ignore the others.
You're absolutely right. They do. So think of them as the three distinct outcomes a leader absolutely must drive. First, there's alignment. This is what we typically associate with leadership in the movies,
The big speech.
the big speech, setting the vision, inspiring the troops, pointing at the mountain, saying, we are going there. It's about getting everyone facing the same direction, sharing the same story, believing in the same mission.
Right, the Braveheart speech, the rallying cry, the poster on the wall with the eagle soaring and some word like excellence underneath it.
Exactly that. But here's the trap. Alignment alone is just dreaming. You can have a room full of excited, pumped up people, but if they don't know what to do when they leave that room, you have absolutely nothing. You have energy with no direction.
Okay.
And that leads us to the second pillar, execution. This is the unsexy part. This is the organizing, the measuring performance, ensuring that the intent actually becomes action.
With spreadsheets.
The spreadsheets, the project plans, the metrics, you can have the most inspiring vision in the world. But if you can't get the product out the door, or you can't manage the supply chain, or you can't balance the books, you fail.
I feel like we see this all the time in the startup world. Great pitch deck, amazing vision, super charismatic founder, but just terrible execution. They burn through cash, they miss deadlines, and poof, they're gone. They had alignment, but zero execution.
All the time. But then you have the third one, which is kind of the silent killer of big successful companies, renewal.
Renewal.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit like a spa treatment. What does it mean in a corporate context?
Renewal is the critical element for longevity. It is all about innovation, adaptation, and learning. If you align and execute perfectly on a strategy that worked 10 years ago, but the market has totally shifted, you are just efficiently running off a cliff.
Oh, wow.
Think of Kodak. They had great alignment. Everyone knew they were a film company. They had amazing execution. Their supply chains were, perfect, but they failed at renewal. They couldn't adapt to the digital shift.
They invented the first digital camera and then buried it.
They buried it because it threatened their core business. Renewal is the survival mechanism. It's the ability to say, what we're doing is working, but it won't work forever.
So effective leadership isn't just being bossy or being inspiring. It's this balancing act of the triad.
Yeah.
You have to align the people, execute the work, and renew the strategy. But you mentioned another phrase in that definition that stuck out to me in a given context. Why is that little phrase so important?
Because the one-size-fits-all model of leadership is a really dangerous myth. The behaviors that make you successful in one environment will absolutely destroy you in another. Imagine a tech startup founder. They're all about passion, chaos, pivoting every Tuesday, move fast and break things. That works for a startup because the cost of failure is pretty low and speed is everything. Now, take that same leader with those same instincts and put them in charge of a nuclear power plant.
Hey guys, let's pivot on the safety protocols today. Let's move fast and break the containment unit. Let's disrupt the cooling system. Yeah, that's a disaster. That is Chernobyl waiting to happen.
It's catastrophic. The behaviors that work in the startup are the exact opposite of what you need in a high-reliability organization, like a nuclear plant or a hospital or an airline maintenance crew. So leadership isn't a fixed set of personality traits. You aren't just a good leader. You are a leader whose behaviors match the context.
That makes so much sense. But the authors go deeper than just behavior, don't they? They introduce this visual metaphor that I think is really powerful, and I want our listeners to really visualize this. The iceberg.
The iceberg is absolutely essential. If you want to understand why your training programs are failing, you have to look at the iceberg. If you look at an iceberg in the ocean, what do you actually see?
You see the tip, the white jagged part sticking out above the water, maybe 10, 20% of the whole mass.
Right. And in leadership, that tip represents observable behaviors. What a leader says, what they do, the emails they write, the way they run a meeting, the way they critique a slide deck. This is what most training programs focus on.
I give you scripts.
They give you scripts. Here's a script for giving feedback. Here's a checklist for delegation. Here is how to hold a town hall. It is all behavior modification. But the authors argue, and neuroscience totally backs this up, that this is only 20% of the picture.
And the other 80% is underwater. The massive, dark, hidden mass beneath the surface.
That's the hidden layer. It consists of your thoughts, your feelings, your values, and most importantly, your mindsets. The core insight here, the real takeaway, is that you cannot sustainably change the behavior above the water without addressing the mindsets below the water. The behavior is just a symptom of the mindset.
Can you give us a really concrete example? Because
Yeah.
mindset can feel a little abstract, a little woo-woo.
Yeah.
How does a mindset actually drive a business failure?
Okay, let's take a classic problem. The manager who won't delegate, the micromanager. We all know one.
Oh, yeah. We've all worked for one.
They're hovering, checking every detail, rewriting their team's work late at night. The behavior, the tip of the iceberg is micromanaging. Now, the traditional solution is to send this manager to a Delegation 101 seminar.
Right.
You give them a checklist. Step 1, assign task. Step 2,
Yeah.
set deadline. Step 3, step back. And you know what? They might even do it for a week. They might try really hard. But as soon as the pressure hits, as soon as a big deadline looms, what
They
happens?
snap back, they grab the wheel, they're back in the weeds, rewriting the slides again.
Exactly. Why? Because you haven't dealt with what's underwater. Below the water, there's likely a mindset rooted in fear. Maybe the thought is, if I don't do it myself, it will fail and I will be blamed.
Okay.
Or maybe it's something deeper, like, if my team does this without me and they do a good job, I won't be needed anymore. I'll be irrelevant.
Oof. Yeah. I'll be irrelevant. That is a powerful, powerful fear that strikes right at your identity. And no amount of delegation checklists is going to fix a deep-seated fear of irrelevance.
Not a chance. Until you address that fear, until you reframe that mindset to something like, my value actually comes from growing my team, not from doing the work myself. The behavior will never stick. It's like trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can do it for a little while, but eventually your arms get tired and it just pops right back up. The mindset always wins.
So true leadership development isn't just skill building. It requires what they call iceberg coaching. You have to bring those unconscious beliefs to the surface. It sounds almost, I don't know, like therapy.
It is deeply introspective. It definitely touches on psychology, but it's distinct from therapy because the goal is professional effectiveness, not just personal healing. But yes, it requires a level of vulnerability that most corporate environments try to stamp out. It asks leaders to look in the mirror and ask, what am I actually afraid of?
And this brings us to the solution. The authors have synthesized all their research into this framework called the Leadership at Scale Diamond. It has 4 non-negotiable principles. And when they say non-negotiable, they really mean it, right? You can't just pick 2 or 3.
They do. They emphasize that if you miss even one of these 4, you are statistically likely to fall right back into that 90% failure rate. It's a system, not a menu you can pick and choose from.
Okay, let's lay out the 4 corners of the diamond before we dive deep into each one. Give us the roadmap.
Sure. So the first principle is focus on critical shifts. This is all about context. You have to know exactly what behaviors you are trying to change based on where your company is right now.
Okay, context first.
Second is engage the organization. This addresses that scale problem. How do you move beyond the lucky few at the top to reach the masses?
Right.
Third is architect for behavioral change. This brings in the hard science, neuroscience. How do adult brains actually learn new things? Hint, it's not in a PowerPoint lecture.
I think I do that one. And the 4th.
And the fourth is integrate and measure. You have to build the ecosystem, the incentives, the structures that support the change so it doesn't just die when people get back to their desks.
Let's dive into principle 1 then.
Yeah.
Context is king. The authors use a specific metric to determine context. Organizational health. Why health? Why not just focus on profit or stock price? I mean, Wall Street cares about stock price.
It is a really crucial distinction. Stock price or quarterly profit is a lagging indicator. It tells you what happened yesterday or last quarter. It is the score on the scoreboard after the game is over.
That's looking in the rearview mirror.
Exactly. Organizational health is a leading indicator. It predicts what will happen tomorrow. The authors define health as the ability to align, execute, and renew, that triad we just talked about. And the data here is just undeniable. Companies with top quartile leadership effectiveness, meaning they are healthy, have 3.5 times greater total return to shareholders, TRS, than those at the bottom.
3.5 times. That is a massive competitive advantage. That's the difference between dominating a market and, slowly going bankrupt. That is the difference between Amazon and Sears.
It is, but here's the catch. Healthy looks different depending on where you are starting from. And this introduces one of my absolute favorite concepts in the book, the situational leadership staircase.
I love this visual. I want listeners to imagine a staircase. You're trying to climb from the bottom, a sick, broken company, to the top, a high-performing elite organization. And the authors are saying you need different gear, different behaviors for each step of that climb. You can't wear flip-flops to climb Everest.
Exactly. You cannot use penthouse behaviors when you are stuck in the basement. So let's walk through the staircase, step by step. At the very bottom, you have baseline behaviors.
Okay.
These are required everywhere, regardless of health. These are things like facilitating collaboration, championing change, demonstrating concern for people. If you don't have these, you don't really have a company. You have a cage match. You have anarchy. This is just the price of admission to play the game.
Okay, so that's table stakes. You have to be a decent human being.
Yeah.
Now, let's say you are in the fourth quartile. You are in the basement. The company's in crisis. The ship is taking on water. Sales are plummeting. Morale is dead. What kind of leadership do you need then?
Then you need to dig out, and the behaviors needed here are very specific. Fact-based decision-making, effective problem-solving, remaining calm. It is directive. It is authoritative. It is stop the bleeding. The authors explicitly warn against using challenging leadership here.
What do they mean by challenging leadership? What's that?
That's encouraging people to push their limits, stretch goals, reach for the stars. Imagine you walk into a hospital trauma ward where a patient is bleeding out on the table, and you yell, okay, everyone, let's push our limits. Let's see how fast we can run. Let's break a record.
You're going to kill the patient.
You're going to kill the patient. They don't need a challenge. They need stability. They need to know the bleeding is going to stop. They need a surgeon, not a motivational coach.
That makes perfect sense. A sick organization is fragile. If you push it too hard, it just shatters.
And a great example of this digging out phase is Lou Gerstner turning around IBM in the 90s. Younger listeners might not remember, but IBM was on the verge of being broken up. It was bleeding cash. It was bureaucratic and bloated. It was a dinosaur. Gerstner didn't come in with these flowery speeches about dreaming big. In fact, he famously said, the last thing IBM needs right now is a vision.
That is such a famous quote. The last thing IBM needs is a vision. It flies in the face of literally everything we are told about leadership.
It does, but it was exactly right for the context.
Right.
He was brutal about facts. He banned jargon in reports. He demanded clear, fact-based problem solving. He provided the stability and the clarity the organization was desperate for. He was the surgeon in the trauma ward.
Okay, so you stabilize the ships, the bleeding stops, you move up the staircase to the third and second quartiles. This is the building execution phase. What happens here?
Now the crisis is over. You aren't dying, but you aren't winning yet. The focus shifts to results orientation, clarifying objectives, keeping groups on task. It's about building the muscle of getting things done repeatedly and reliably. It's about efficiency. It's about process. This is where you implement the Six Sigma, the lean methodologies. You're building the machine.
And then finally you reach the top, the penthouse, first quartile. The organization is humming. What changes here?
This is where it gets really surprising. Once you're at the top, the authors found that you actually need to stop focusing so much on strict objectives and financial consequences. The shift is towards inspirational leadership, motivating others, modeling values, sensing needs.
Really? So you back off the hard numbers?
You do, because top performers at this level are often intrinsically motivated. They want purpose. They want mastery. If you keep hammering them with, do this and get a bonus, or do this or you're fired, you can actually degrade their performance. You need to unlock their creativity, not just manage their tasks.
That is such a crucial distinction. If you use inspirational leadership when the building is on fire, people think you are completely delusional. Why is he talking about values when we can't make payroll? But if you use command and control, when you have a team of high-performing innovators, they'll just quit. They'll go somewhere that treats them like adults.
Precisely. You have to treat the patient according to their condition. And here's the kicker. In today's world, the VUCA world.
VUCA. Break that acronym down for us. It sounds like a bad sci-fi villain.
It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. It basically just means the world is crazy and unpredictable. In a VUCA world, contexts change incredibly fast. You might be in the penthouse on Monday market leader, everything's great. Then on Tuesday, a competitor releases a disruptive AI tool, or a pandemic hits, or a supply chain breaks, and boom, suddenly you are right back in the basement. You are in crisis mode.
So you can't just pick a style and stay there. You can't just say, well, I am an inspirational leader, and that's it. You need to be a shapeshifter.
He'd call it being a decathlete.
Yeah.
You need adaptive leadership. You need the self-awareness to know where you are on the staircase right now and the range to switch behaviors instantly. This requires what they call centered leadership, managing your own energy so you can stay agile. Because if you're exhausted and stressed, you will just default to your baseline. You won't be able to adapt. You'll be the hammer, seeing every single problem as a nail.
So that's principle 1. Know your context. Don't copy Google's culture if you are running a turnaround. Okay, now let's move to principle 2. Engage the organization. This addresses what I call the lucky few problem. I've seen this a million times. The company picks the top 50 executives, sends them to a fancy retreat in the Swiss Alps or Napa Valley, and expects the culture of a 50,000-person company to magically change.
And it never, ever works. It creates a class divide. Those 50 people come back all fired up. They're full of new ideas, speaking a new language, and they run smack into a wall of 49,950 people who haven't changed at all. The old culture eats them for breakfast.
Yeah.
They get cynical, they get isolated, and eventually they just go back to the old way of doing things to survive.
So how do we fix that? To fix this, the authors say you need 3 things: breadth, depth, and pace. Let's talk about breadth first. Does this mean we have to train everyone? Because training 50,000 people sounds incredibly expensive and impossible.
No, and that's the good news. You don't need to change 100% of the people to change a culture. You need a critical mass. The authors reference tipping point theory from sociology, and the magic number is somewhere between 10% and 30% of the population.
10 to 30%. That is so much more manageable. But surely it's not just any 10%. If I train all the interns, that probably won't change the company.
Correct. It's not just the C-suite, and it's not random. You need to identify the pivotal influencers. These are the people who others look to for cues on how to behave. It might be a highly respected plant manager who's been there for 20 years. It might be a union rep. It might be a veteran salesperson who everyone trusts. These are the people who, when they walk into the cafeteria, people want to sit with them.
The informal leaders, the nodes in the social network.
Exactly. If you get them on board, if they start behaving differently, the rest of the herd looks around and says, oh, okay, if Sarah's doing it, I guess this is how we do things now. It uses social pressure to your advantage.
Right. Social proof. Okay, and what about pace? Why does speed matter? I would think slow and steady wins the race. Change is hard. Shouldn't we take our time with it?
Not in transformations. In transformations, momentum is everything. If you drag a rollout over, say, 5 years, people get change fatigue. They just wait for it to blow over. They think, oh, this is just another HR initiative. If I keep my head down, it'll go away.
Right, this too shall pass.
Yeah, exactly. You have to outrun the resistance. There's a case study in the book about a global energy company that illustrates this perfectly. They needed to roll out a new strategy to 120 countries.
120 countries. That sounds like a logistical nightmare. Different languages, different cultures, different time zones. That sounds like a 5-year project, minimum.
They did it in 6 months.
6 months? How is that even possible? That sounds physically impossible.
Yeah. They prioritized pace over perfection. They realized that if they went slow, the strategy would be obsolete before it was even implemented. So they didn't hire an army of expensive external consultants to teach every class. They trained 80 internal facilitators, people from within the business, to deliver the training. They turned their own people into the teachers.
Ah, so they scaled it internally.
They did, and they hit the organization so fast and so hard that the resistance didn't have time to organize. It created a sense of inevitability. This is happening, and it is happening now.
That is aggressive, but I see why it works. It's like ripping off a Band-Aid versus peeling it slowly. The shock helps solidify the change. And using internal facilitators probably helped with credibility, too. It's not McKinsey telling us what to do. It's Dave from operations is telling us.
Exactly right. It builds ownership.
Okay, let's move to principle 3. This is my favorite part because I love brain science. Architect for behavioral change. Basically, why is traditional corporate training so bad? You know the drill. You sit in a dark room, watch a PowerPoint for 8 hours, eat a stale bagel, drink lukewarm coffee, and you forget everything by the time you get to the parking lot.
It's the sheep dip approach.
The sheep dip, yeah. Dip them in, pull them out, hope something stuck.
It is scientifically designed to fail. It is almost impressive how bad it is. The retention rate for classroom lectures, just passive listening, is about 10% after 3 months. It is a complete and utter waste of time and money. The problem is that traditional training fights against how the brain actually works. It treats the brain like a bucket you just pour facts into. But the brain is an organ that rewires itself based on experience. We have to embrace neuroscience and neuroplasticity.
Neuroplasticity. That's the idea that the brain can literally rewire itself,
Yeah.
right? That we can physically change the structure of our brains through experience.
Yes. For a long time, there was this myth that the brain stopped developing in childhood. You can't teach an old dog new tricks. Science shows that is completely false. The adult brain can rewire itself. It can form new neural pathways, but, and this is a big but, it's harder than a child's brain. It requires specific conditions. It needs extreme attention, repetition, and real emotional connection. You can't just listen. You have to struggle. You have to feel something.
The authors lay out 7 adult learning principles. We probably don't have time for all 7, but let's hit the big ones. First up, stretch. What does that mean?
Learning happens outside the comfort zone. If you're comfortable, you aren't learning, you're just remembering. You are reinforcing what you already know. To learn, you need to fail a little. You need to be confused, but, and this is key, you can't push people into the terror zone.
The terror zone?
Yeah, there's a biological concept called the Yerkes-Dodson law. Imagine a bell curve. Performance increases with stress up to a peak, and then it just crashes.
So some stress is good.
Some stress is essential. It releases noradrenaline, which tells the brain, pay attention, this matters. But if the stress gets too high, if people are terrified of being fired or humiliated or looking stupid, their amygdala hijacks the brain. It triggers the fight or flight response. The prefrontal cortex, which handles higher order thinking and learning, literally shuts down. They cannot learn.
So you need safe stretch, high challenge, low threat.
That's the formula.
It's a tough balance. You need to make them sweat, but not panic. Okay, next one. Self-directed. Adults hate being told what to do.
We value autonomy. If you force me to learn a skill I don't care about, I'll resent it. I will actively resist it. If I choose to learn it because it solves a problem I actually have, I'll devour it.
Yeah.
Programs need an opt-in element. You have to let people choose their path, or at least help them see how it benefits them, not just the company. It has to be, here's how this makes your life easier, not here's what the company demands of you.
And then there's on-the-job application. This seems so obvious, but it's rarely done well. Usually training is this thing that's separate from your actual work.
This is the field part of their field forum coaching model. The authors argue that training should happen in 3 distinct spaces. Forum is the off-site immersive experience. No PowerPoint lectures. Deep emotional connection. This is where you have the aha moments.
Okay.
Coaching is what helps you process it and make sense of it. But field is where the actual rewiring happens. This is the breakthrough projects.
Tell us more about breakthrough projects. That sounds important.
This is brilliant. Instead of giving people homework or silly simulations, you give them a real business problem that actually matters to the P&L. You say, okay, you just learned about collaboration. Now go fix the supply chain bottleneck in the Western region. You have to learn a concept in the morning and apply it to a real high-stakes business problem in the afternoon. If you don't use it, the neural pathway just fades immediately. It's use it or lose it.
I really like how they break down that model. It connects the classroom to the boardroom. But let's go back to coaching for a second. Why is that so critical? Why can't I just learn it myself?
Coaching is the glue. Remember the iceberg. It is incredibly hard to see your own iceberg. You can't see your own back. You can't see your own blind spots. You need a coach to hold up a mirror and ask the tough questions. Why did you react that way in the meeting? What were you afraid of? Why did you shut down when Sarah challenged your idea? That reflection is what locks in the learning. Without the coach, you just have an experience. With the coach, you have an insight. It turns stuff that happened into actual wisdom.
Okay, principle 4. Last one. Integrate and measure. This is where the tragedy of the lone wolf happens. This part really resonated with me because I think I've been this guy. Imagine you take a manager, let's call him Bob. You send Bob to this amazing leadership course. He learns to be collaborative, to listen, to empower his team. He comes back to the office all glowing and ready to lead. He's Bob 2.0, but the company structure is exactly the same. His bonus is tied 100% to his individual sales. His boss is a tyrant who screams at him for spending time listening instead of selling. What happens to Bob?
Bob gets absolutely crushed. The system just beats him down. Bob effectively has 2 choices. He reverts to his old behavior to survive and becomes cynical and jaded about training forever. Or Bob quits and goes to a competitor who actually values his new skills.
Either way, the company loses.
It's a total loss. This is the trap of the lone wolf. You cannot change the individual without changing the ecosystem they live in. It's like planting a healthy seed in toxic soil. The authors use the influence model here. It has 4 quadrants. If you want Bob to change, 4 things must happen simultaneously.
Walk us through the 4 quadrants. This seems like a great checklist for any change management.
It is. Number 1, role modeling. Bob needs to see his leaders doing it. If the CEO talks about collaboration but acts like a dictator, Bob sees the hypocrisy and ignores the training. Humans are mimics. We watch what the alpha does.
Right.
Number 2, understanding and conviction. Bob needs to know why this matters. He needs a change story that makes sense to him.
The why is so important. If it's just because HR said so, nobody cares. It has to be, we are doing this because if we don't, our competitor is going to eat our lunch.
Exactly. It needs to feel existential. Number 3, talent and skills. Bob needs the actual training, the how. This is the part most companies focus on exclusively, and they forget the others.
And what's number 4?
Number 4 is the killer. Formal mechanisms. The structures must support it. If you tell Bob to collaborate, but you pay him to compete, he will compete. Every single time.
Cognitive dissonance. We hate it when our actions don't match our incentives. Humans strive for consistency.
Right. So you have to change the IT systems, the HR reviews, the bonus structures. If you don't align the hard systems with the soft skills, the hard systems win. The wallet always wins. If you want collaboration, you have to bonus the team, not just the individual.
And finally, under this principle, measurement. We have to stop asking, did you like the muffins at the seminar?
Oh, the dreaded happy sheet. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much did you enjoy the speaker? Was the room temperature okay? That measures entertainment, not impact. It tells you nothing about leadership. You need to measure 3 levels.
Okay, what are they?
1, learning. Did they actually acquire the knowledge? Can they pass a test on it? 2, behavior. Did they change how they act? You measure this with 360-degree feedback from their team, their peers, their boss. Did they actually stop interrupting in meetings? And 3, impact. Did the business make more money? Did employee retention go up? Did errors go down?
The bottom line.
The bottom line. There's a specific example in the book of a chemical company that ran a leadership transformation. They didn't just feel better. They tracked a $1.5 billion increase in net income directly linked to the program.
$1.5 billion.
Yes, that is the metric that matters to the CEO.
$1.5 billion. That pays for a lot of coaching. That shuts down the it's too expensive argument instantly. So, okay, we've covered the theory, the diamond, context, engagement, neuroscience, integration. But I think this really comes alive when we look at the case study in the book, the story of NCL and Carolyn Randolph. Now, this is a fictional case, but the authors say it's a composite of their real experiences with dozens of companies. It pulls it all together.
It does, and it reads very true to life. I think anyone who's worked in a large corporate environment will recognize these characters and these problems. So Carolyn is the CEO of NCL, a global clothing company. They're successful, about $6 billion in revenue, but they're stalling. They're missing trends. The executives are jaded. They're tired.
A classic case of good but not great.
Exactly. And Carolyn realizes she doesn't have the bench strength to innovate. She feels alone at the top. She looks around the boardroom and sees good managers, but no real leaders.
So she decides to fix it. She launches a program called LEAP. But she doesn't just hire a motivational speaker. She follows the 4D process, which perfectly mirrors the diamond. First, diagnose. She starts with the facts.
She doesn't guess. She uses data. She uses the Organizational Health Index, OHI, and she finds out they're 3rd quartile. They're really good at pure performance, hitting the numbers, grinding it out, but they are terrible at whole person focus and bottom-up innovation.
So they're burning people out to get results.
Precisely. So they identified the specific from-to shifts. They needed to move from top-down decision-making to empowering the front line. They needed to move from a fear of failure to learning from failure.
Design. They didn't just buy a program off the shelf. They built these breakthrough projects. And I love this part. One of the projects was fixing the call center. This wasn't a homework assignment. It was a real business problem that was costing them real money. The call center was a disaster zone. They used the training to fix the call center, which ended up paying for the whole leadership program.
Which is brilliant. Then, deliver. They launched the Lead Self Forum. And I love the detail about Tom, one of the participants. Tom is a high-performing executive. He hits his numbers every quarter. But his team hates working for him. He just burns people out.
The classic brilliant jerk.
The classic brilliant jerk. He goes to the forum, and through the iceberg work, the deep coaching, he realizes he has a listening problem. He interrupts constantly. Why? Not because he's a jerk, but because deep down, he has a belief, a mindset. If I listen, I'm being slow. And if I'm slow, I'm failing. I need to be the smartest person in the room to be safe.
That is such a relatable fear. The fear of being slow, of not adding value every second. Once he realized that fear, that mindset, he could actually change. He couldn't fix the interrupting until he fixed the fear of being slow.
Right, and he started asking his team, "Tell me when I'm interrupting you." He gave them permission to call him out on his behavior.
That's a huge breakthrough. He moved from "I'm just efficient" to "my fear is hurting the team," and finally, drive impact. Carolyn didn't stop at the workshops. She changed the bonus structure. She changed the succession planning. This is the part that takes real guts.
It does.
She made it clear. If you weren't modeling the new behaviors, you didn't get promoted, period. Even if you hit your numbers. Even if you were the top salesperson in the company.
That is the hardest part, firing or holding back a high performer because they destroy the culture.
Yeah.
But you have to do it, because if you promote the toxic high performer, you kill the whole program. You signal that the behavior doesn't really matter as long as you make money.
And the money always wins.
Carolyn held the line. And the result for NCL was a complete turnaround. Not just happier staff, but tangible business metrics improved. They became a top quartile company.
It's a great story because it shows this isn't magic. It's engineering. It's rigorous. It takes guts. It takes patience. It's not a weekend retreat.
That is the synthesis of this entire deep dive. Leadership at scale is an engineering problem. It requires rigorous diagnosis, neuroscience-backed design, and systemic integration. If you treat it like a soft skill, you will get soft results. If you treat it like a science, you get transformation.
So here is the final provocation for everyone listening. Look at your organization right now. Look at your leadership training. Is it just a class that people attend once a year? Is it a box-ticking exercise so HR can say they did something? Or is it a systemic upgrade to your company's operating system?
And ask yourself this, are your incentives fighting your training? Are you telling people to be one thing but paying them to be another? Because at the end of the day, the money always wins.
And for yourself, look below the waterline. What's in your iceberg? What are the beliefs and fears holding you back that no amount of skill training is ever going to fix? That is a scary question, but it's the only one that leads to real growth.
This has been a fascinating dive into the science of leadership. Huge thanks to the authors of Leadership at Scale for the incredible data. And thank you all for listening. Go check your icebergs. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.